Okay, so the first question that we should ask as conservatives after we read this tweet from Mehdi Hasan that says it's very simple. If you're a white supremacist, you shouldn't get really annoyed or upset when the president condemns white supremacists. The first thing we should say is, okay, but what is white supremacy though? Define it for us. Tell us exactly what you mean when you say this phrase. Because we will find in the answer to this question that the answer that the left gives is very, very different than the answer that the right gives. And it has nothing to do with the right holding any kind of negative views on people with other skin colors. The right is made up of people of all skin colors, as is the left. The right's definition of white supremacy is any kind of racial superiority ideology. The left's definition of white supremacy has nothing to do with that. The left's definition of white supremacy, they redefine words. We know they redefine words for a purpose so that they can hijack an ideology like actual white supremacy that almost everyone universally condemns, that barely exists, statistically insignificant in our nation. Statistically, 0 people in our nation hold this view. And they hijack that term because they know they can turn everyone off if they associate Republicans or Republican policies with this view. So let's look at some of the things that the left has called white supremacy. And to do this, this is actually from the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. They published at one point on their website a little handout called Aspects and Assumptions of Whiteness and White Culture in the United States. And they list, among other things, rugged individualism. This is an aspect of whiteness. Now, the inference here is that this is a negative thing because they say whiteness and white culture are dominant, they're oppressive, they're something that has marginalized the Black community throughout the decades. Rugged individualism, an emphasis on the scientific method, a work ethic, time, guys, justice, communication such as grammar. So all of these different things that have nothing whatsoever to do with race, even the African American History Museum under the Obama administration, I believe is when this handout was first put on the website, have been condemned as being associated with white supremacy. In addition to that, organizations like the Black Lives Matter movement have said that the nuclear family is a white supremacist institution. A white supremacist institution, that free market capitalism is a white supremacist institution, that mathematics is a white supremacist, perpetuates white supremacy, which that one's doubly laughable because mathematics was literally invented in the Middle East. White men weren't even associated with higher mathematics, the invention of higher mathematics. But we're told that police and law enforcement and our system of criminal justice is all perpetuating institutions, or they are institutions that perpetuate white supremacy. We're told sex essentialism, which is the biological definition of sex, man and woman, the gender binary, as the left calls it, that is an institution perpetuating white supremacy. So now we have a totally different context for Mehdi Hasan's tweets, but also for Joe Biden's speech, right? Because when the left says white supremacy, you and I automatically think of what white supremacy actually is. We think of this poisonous, evil ideology that holds that human beings of different skin colors are somewhat subhuman or inferior. This ideology that everyone in our country, on both the left and the right, rejects. But the left has redefined this word to suit their political narrative because they think our revulsion at the word white supremacy, at the phrase white supremacy, will cause us to jump on board with their political agenda to abolish the civil institutions of our nation, the economic institutions of our nation, and ultimately the governmental institutions of our nation that make our nation the best, the freest, the most prosperous nation that the world has ever known. The left, of course, hates this nation, wants to destroy it, and wants instead a communist Marxist utopia. And so now, of course, we look at Joe Biden's speech at this university and we realize, well, okay, yeah, this story actually is worth commenting on. It is worth condemning him, not just because he's stupid, not just because he's awkward, not just because he's trying to insert racialism into everything, not just because he's issuing false allegations about both events, but also individuals. He's not just trying to falsely associate Republicans with white supremacy, which is grotesque because it is patently untrue. but because he's labeling all of these things that have nothing to do with a poisonous ideology as being associated with a poisonous ideology. And what's more, he's calling people who perpetuate what he calls white supremacy, which isn't white supremacy, terrorists, right? So the defense of Mehdi Hasan, when conservative pushed back on this, was, well, Biden said he was that the threat of terrorism, the biggest terrorist threat in our country, is white supremacist terrorism. And my answer to that is the same question as before. Well, what is terrorism? The Department of Homeland Security has labeled almost all Republicans as militia violent extremists if they so much as fly the Betsy Ross flag, or if they follow the founding fathers, or if they have the Don't Tread on Me flag. So your definition of white supremacy and your definition of terrorism are critically important to your condemnation. Because while a sensible person might listen to Joe Biden and define what he's saying literally, it would be a mistake for us as sensible people to do that. What we have to do is we have to understand that he's now speaking in coded language. He's now speaking in words that the left has redefined to suit their political agenda. And their political agenda is the destruction of our nation and the destruction of us. As you can see, why it is now necessary to comment on this. So Joe Biden also displayed his corruption at the NIH. After Dr. Fauci, quote unquote, retired, he's technically retired from the NIH, but he's actually not. He's actually not fully retired from the NIH. The NIH got an interim director. This was also after Francis Collins left the head. Fauci, of course, was at the NIAID. It's a sub-agency of the NIH. Francis Collins left the NIH, and now Biden has nominated a new doctor named Dr. Monica Bertagnolli to head up the NIH. Dr. Monica Bertagnolli is a simply terrible choice. She's like just a girl version of Fauci. A girl version of Fauci. Jordan Schachtel over at the Dossier Substack reports that Dr. Bertagnolli has received $290.8 million in research funding from Pfizer. Think about that number for a second. $290 million. $290 million. Okay, that's like what? Half of what Fox paid to Dominion voting systems? Almost half? This is an enormous amount of money. The Daily Signal put together a report, this is from 2015 to 2021, that she received more than 116 grants, this new NIH director, or this new nominee for NIH director. More than 116 grants from Pfizer. It totaled more than 89% of her research grants. Hi guys, it's Liz Wheeler. Don't forget to watch my show, The Liz Wheeler Show, every night at 7 p.m. on the First TV. You can download the free First TV app, or you can visit thefirsttv.com/Liz and start watching today.